On November the 19th, 2022, the eve of Transgender Day of Remembrance, an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs called Club Q was the scene of a horrific massacre where 5 innocent people around my age and younger were killed and 25 others were injured by a lone shooter wielding an automatic rifle. It's impossible to say with certainty, but I think it's obvious that the culmination of mental and behavioral issues, easy access to high-powered weapons in the USA, and a homophobically charged cultural environment are all to blame. For more of my takes on the firearms problems in the US, I have made a previous video about the Second Amendment. Go check that out if you wish. What is clear is that in the aftermath, the sharp escalation of far right-wing extremists' anti-LGBTQ rhetoric increased, doubled down, and demonized the gays, the transes, and the drag performers as groomers, as if the victims somehow brought this on themselves. And they did so in a manner not unlike the NIFB, an extremist religious cult who praised and celebrated another massacre at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando on June the 12th, 2016, another LGBTQ venue where 49 people were killed and 53 others were wounded. To be clear, the hateful rhetoric was already widespread before this incident, and several of the survivors testified that it was the cause and needs to stop, or else it will cause more violence. Survivor James Slaw said that LGBTQ issues should not be politicized and urged respect for basic human rights. Outside of these spaces, we are continually being dehumanized, marginalized, and targeted. The fear-based and hateful rhetoric surrounding the LGBTQ+ community, especially around trans individuals and drag performers, leads to violence. Yet still, despite that, many prominent right-wingers have continued to publicly assert that there's a link between LGBTQ identities and child abuse, grooming, and paedophilia. In a so-called queer indoctrination. Stochastic terrorism, thy name is Tucker Carlson. And his unceremonious firing couldn't have happened to a nicer shitbag. This is probably not new information to most of my audience, but I thought it was relevant to remind everyone of the high stakes involved when we're talking about this topic. Accusations of anyone being a child groomer on the sole basis of their sexuality or gender are unfounded and tantamount to hate speech, which causes violence against us. This is not by accident. This is the goal. It's been hard to make a video about this because it's such a heavy topic. It's mentally draining, and I've had stuff going on in my personal life anyway, which have constrained my time, which is why I took a short break from YouTube. I'm hoping to get better at that. But it's also very hard to avoid sounding redundant when there's so many other LGBTQ creators who have already covered this topic about us being labelled as groomers. Opinion pieces and think pieces and video essays abound. You can find them quite easily, created by us for people who are perhaps misinformed, perhaps not yet informed, For more of a concise analysis on events that have happened, I would recommend The Humanist Report. This is a left-wing, independent American political news channel on YouTube, hosted by Mike Figueredo, who is an openly gay man and trans ally. I'm telling you this bias up front, so you're not left wondering, what's the angle here? Since Christmas 2022, until now, which is the beginning of May 2023, roughly 50 videos have been published directly about LGBTQ topics. Of those, I'd say the majority were about very strong anti-LGBTQ happenings. A few were pro, and a few outliers were somewhat neutral. But even the positive stories were mostly people standing up to discrimination that was happening. So, not really a good thing. And yes, I am aware that bad news is more attention-grabbing than good, and this news channel has to survive somehow. But the point is that the effects this groomer narrative is having on government, on governance, on legislation is very real and very scary. There have been over 400 bills proposed to restrict LGBTQ events, like drag shows, healthcare, like trans access to medical care, and even books. Yes, restrictions of freedom of speech. And that's in the short space of 4 whole months. The word genocide has been thrown around quite a lot. And when it comes to what's happening in the US, I'd say that word is accurate. And it doesn't bode well for the remainder of us in the rest of the world. Now, I could go into details of why the groomer allegations are incorrect, but what would be the point? There's plenty of other videos that have already covered and outline these reasons in detail, and besides, the people who really need to hear all those reasons are willfully ignorant and won't listen to me or anyone else. But let me tell you a few things unique to my perspective that no one else can. Allow me to say it once for the record. I am not interested in stealing, brainwashing, or molesting your children. Keep your smelly brats away from me. I'm going to leave all that, fiddly weirdness to the religious types. I mean, I shouldn't need to go into details at this point about crimes from literally every Christian denomination there is. And then there's this little slice of wackiness from the Holy Book itself, Psalm 137:9. Blessed is he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Such a good book. Look, as for forcing children to medically transition, that accusation is so ridiculous. I'm not even medically transitioning, and I don't think I really want to, but if I reach that decision that it would be best for me to try that again, these damn kids better get in line. Seriously, I do want everyone to be able to access medical transition. It's too bad we can't, thanks to the scaremongering from the Conservatives restricting and gatekeeping trans-related healthcare for everyone. Not just children, not just minors, everyone. That's just the excuse they needed to smokescreen their foot in the door. To be clear, medical healthcare for minors, for children, does not include surgeries, does not include cross-sex hormones. Medically speaking, the only thing that ought to be prescribed as in line with every psychological association that deals with trans healthcare can advise is puberty blockers for adolescents who need more time to work out what they want to do with their own bodies. And this is just buying them time to think about it. All other aspects of transition in minors are social. This involves things like changing name, hair, clothing, etc. And all of these, including puberty blockers, all of these measures are completely reversible. Puberty, however, has irreversible effects. Think about that one. So the whole think of the children line doesn't really wash with me when they try to ignore all the relevant studies on the positive effects of trans people being affirmed, being allowed to explore and express themselves. Not to mention that trans children living in fear, knowing that they can't live the way that they need to feel happy and good about themselves, and being furthermore actively scapegoated by government officials, is compounding into a horrific situation. Access to trans healthcare sure would have helped me as a former trans child. I could and should have got a referral to a gender specialist clinic in the 90s, back in the days before waiting lists were a nightmarish 5+ years and the gatekeeping was through the roof. Because when I was a child, it was me saying, I want to be a girl. I was the one acting like a girl, wearing dresses, with painted nails. It was coming from me. It wasn't groomers and it wasn't leftists pushing me. It was me pushing against a society that didn't want me to be trans. And if LGBTQ awareness was more widespread at that time, I might have received help from someone who actually knew what they were talking about. Because I did go to child counsellors and things, and they were not specialists in gender. They were next to useless. Children seeing a drag queen read a story to them is not going to turn them gay or trans. It just doesn't happen that way. That's kind of like saying just because I watched Lily Savage a few times on TV when I was a child, that must have turned me queer or something. Like, kind of ignores the massive amount of cisgender adults around me, also on TV and in real life. Teachers, parents. Guess what? My parents are both cis and straight. They didn't turn me anything. Now here's what actually happens to kids. I know someone who has a 14-year-old child, and I'm not going to disclose any details because we are talking about a minor whose privacy should be respected. This person is assigned female at birth and discovered that they had an interest in girls at the age of about 13, and then, came to the conclusion that, okay, lesbian. And then after thinking about it, came to the second conclusion that actually they might be trans. So, with the time and the space to support and explore the name, pronouns, clothing, appearance, expression, this child came to the conclusion that, drumroll please, not trans. Because you can't just force someone to be something they aren't. It's not like I go out shooting transgenderizing laser beams out of my eyes, just transing people around me. It doesn't work that way. Oh, I'm late for work again. And, Well, looks like I've got to fill my daily quota of transgenderizing people. Can't start the day without transing at least 2 people before work. That's just how it is. Bonus points for transing a child. Exposing young people to the truth about LGBTQ people, that we exist, and teaching them to accept us isn't grooming. Keeping them ignorant to the existence of every flavour of rainbow person around them perpetuates the cycle of bigotry, which again is the intent. So I want to conclude by saying to all the trans people, the gay people, the drag queens, and everybody else under the rainbow umbrella, don't give up. Live. Do it for yourself. Do it for your loved ones around you. Keep fighting and speaking up for your own right to exist. Don't give up. Because for any kids or young people who might be watching this, when you get independence, trust me, things do get better. Keep pushing. Do it out of love for yourself, for your friends, for your found family, for your real family if you're close to them. Do it out of spite for all those awful, horrible, negative, disgusting people who are trying to squash you down. Spite is a great motivator. People like us live in their heads rent-free. Never forget that and do not give up that power. You are all valid. God damn it.